Imagine walking into a restaurant with your family, excited for a nice meal, only to have the staff mock you with animal noises just because of your skin color. Now imagine owning that restaurant and discovering your employees are the ones doing it. What would you do? Today's shocking story shows how one CEO's undercover mission revealed the ugly truth behind declining sales. In the dramatic moment, he fired an entire shift in front of stunned customers. Welcome to the channel. Before we dive in, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Let's get back to the story now. James Wilson removed his suit jacket and carefully hung it in his closet, exchanging it for a plain black polo shirt that would normally never touch his carefully curated wardrobe. As the 42-year-old founder and CEO of Urban Plates, a thriving restaurant chain with over 50 locations nationwide, James had built his reputation on impeccable taste and attention to detail. But tonight, he needed a blend-in. He studied his reflection in the mirror. The polo shirt hung loosely on his athletic frame, lacking the tailored precision of his usual attire. He'd swapped his designer eyeglasses for contact lenses and grown out his usually close-crop hair into a less maintained style. A few days of stubble completed the transformation. Perfect. No one would recognize him as the polished executive whose face appeared on the company website and in industry magazines. James's phone buzzed with a text from Martin, his chief operations officer, and the only person who knew about tonight's mission. Everything's set. You're on schedule as Jay Williams, new evening shift server. Manager thinks you're a last-minute transfer from Miami location due to staffing shortages. James texted back a quick thanks. This wasn't his first time going undercover in one of his own restaurants. He made a habit of it at least once a year to stay connected to the ground-level operations. But this visit felt different, more urgent. For the past 3 months, the Atlanta location of Urban Plates had shown troubling patterns. Revenue remained strong, but customer demographics had shifted dramatically. The diverse clientele that characterized their other locations had given way to an overwhelmingly white customer base. Online reviews from Black customers mentioned uncomfortable experiences and unwelcoming service without specific details. When James had questioned the regional manager, he'd received vague assurances about changing neighborhood dynamics and natural market fluctuations. Something wasn't adding up, and James was determined to see for himself. He arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes before his scheduled shift, parking his modest rental car in the employee section at the back of the lot. The Atlanta location was one of their newer outlets, with the sleek industrial meets cozy aesthetic that defined the Urban Plates brand. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it should. James entered through the employee entrance, where he was met by the evening manager, Mike Peterson, a white man in his mid-30s with a crisp uniform and an easy smile. "You must be Jay," Mike said, extending his hand. "Thanks for jumping in on such short notice. I hear Miami's even more short-staffed than we are." "Happy to help," James replied, carefully modulating his voice to sound more casual than his usual executive tone. "Looking forward to seeing how you do things here in Atlanta." Mike gave a small laugh. "We're in a tight ship, but we have fun too. You'll see." He handed James an employee manual and uniform. "Get changed, and I'll introduce you to the team. We've got about 20 minutes before opening for dinner service." In the staff locker room, James quickly changed into the standard Urban Plates uniform, black pants, and a dark blue button-down with the company logo. As he was adjusting his name tag, he overheard 2 servers talking on the other side of the lockers. "Did you see that reservation for 8 tonight?" a male voice asked. "Another church group. Black church group." Another male voice clarified with a noticeable change in tone. "Table 12. Make sure Amber doesn't get stuck with it. Last time she got stiffed on the tip." "Man, I hate those large groups. They're so demanding and never tip right. Just put them in Greg's section. He knows how to handle them." James felt his jaw tighten. The conversation wasn't explicitly racist, but the coded language and assumptions were unmistakable. He made a mental note of the voices as he finished changing. When he emerged, he found a group of about a dozen staff members gathered for the pre-shift meeting. Mike introduced him briefly. "Everyone, this is Jay. He's helping us out from Miami for a while. Make him feel welcome." There were nods and a few half-hearted greetings as Mike continued with the evening announcements. reviewing specials and VIP reservations. James scanned the staff, taking in details. The dinner shift was surprisingly homogeneous. Out of 12 people, only 2 were people of color. A young Latina woman whose name tag read Sophia, working as hostess, and a black man named Darren in chef's uniform. The rest of the staff, including Mike, were white. This was unusual for urban plates, which typically had diverse staffing across all positions. James had built his company on the principle that restaurants should reflect the communities they served, not just in their food offerings, but in their people. "Jay, you'll be shadowing Greg tonight," Mike announced, pointing to a tall guy with sandy blonde hair who looked to be in his late 20s. Greg gave a perfunctory nod, his expression making it clear he wasn't thrilled about training someone new. As the restaurant opened for dinner service, James followed Greg through the opening procedures, careful to act like someone with restaurant experience but new to this specific establishment. Greg's training style was minimal, more showing than telling, with an underlying assumption that James should already know most of the protocols. "Just keep up and don't mess up my section," Greg told him bluntly as they began taking their first tables. The restaurant filled quickly, a good sign for business, but James immediately noticed what the reports had indicated. The clientele was almost exclusively white, unusual for a restaurant located in a diverse Atlanta neighborhood known for its mixed demographics. For the first hour, everything seemed to run normally, if not particularly warmly. Greg was efficient, but not especially friendly with customers, though James noted a distinct shift in his demeanor between tables. With certain customers, particularly older white couples, Greg would engage in cheerful banter. With others, including a mixed-race couple seated in the corner, his interactions were noticeably cooler and more transactional. James was careful to maintain his cover, asking appropriate questions and following Greg's lead while looking for opportunities to interact with other staff. He was particularly interested in the 2 employees of color he'd noticed earlier. How were they being treated? Did they sense any issues? His opportunity came when Sophia, the hostess, approached their server station to adjust some table assignments. "We've got a walk-in party of 6, she informed Greg, who immediately frowned. "What kind?" Greg asked, his tone making the question sound loaded. Sophia's expression tightened slightly. "Just a family, Greg. You know what I mean," Greg pressed. "Are they going to be trouble?" James watched Sophia's reaction carefully. She seemed uncomfortable but resigned, as if this was a familiar conversation. "They're just people who want dinner," she replied evenly. "I'm putting them in Section 3. Greg rolled his eyes. "Fine, but if they run me ragged for free bread all night and then leave 5%, you owe me." As Sophia walked away, James noticed her shoulders slump slightly. He made a note to find a way to speak with her alone later. Over the next couple of hours, James observed more subtle but consistent patterns in how different customers were treated. Tables with white customers received more frequent check-ins and faster service. When a black couple was seated in Greg's section, he delegated most of their service to James, making excuses about needing to handle other tables. The situation grew more tense when the church group reservation arrived. A group of 8 black professionals who, despite Greg's earlier comments, were dressed in business attire rather than church clothes. They were seated at a large round table in the center of the dining room. James noticed several servers exchanging glances as the group was seated. Mike, the manager, whispered something to one of the bartenders who laughed in response, both of them glancing toward the table. Greg approached James with a grimace. "Looks like we got the special table. Follow my lead, but don't bend over backwards. These types will run you to death for extras and substitutions." James had to work hard to maintain his facade of casual compliance. "These types," Greg seemed to catch himself, studying James briefly. Demanding customers. "Corporate types." James nodded non-committally and followed Greg to the table. Despite Greg's warnings, the group was polite and straightforward with their orders. Their requests for modifications were minimal and reasonable, a dressing on the side, an allergy concern. Yet Greg treated each request as an imposition, his customer service smile never reaching his eyes. When they returned to the server station, Greg muttered, "See what I mean? Special sauce on the side, no onions, extra this, hold that. Seemed like standard requests to me, James commented, keeping his tone neutral. Greg gave him a look. You'll learn. Miami must be different. As the night progressed, James found small opportunities to interact with other staff members. Most were guarded, treating him with a mild suspicion often reserved for newcomers in established teams. But a pattern was emerging. There appeared to be an inner circle led by Mike, Greg, and a few others, while some staff members, including Sophia and Darren, operated on the periphery. The breaking point came shortly before 9 p.m. A black family entered the restaurant. Parents with 3 children, all dressed nicely for what appeared to be a special occasion. Sophia greeted them warmly and began to lead them to their table when James overheard something that made his blood run cold. From the bar area, where Mike was standing with Greg and 2 other servers, came unmistakable sounds. Low hooting noises that were clearly meant to mimic monkeys. It wasn't loud enough for the family to hear from the entrance, but it was audible to staff and some nearby tables. James froze, momentarily unable to process what he was hearing. The noises continued for a few seconds, accompanied by suppressed laughter from the group. One of the servers made a scratching gesture under his arm, mimicking a primate. Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she continued leading the family to their table, deliberately taking a route that avoided the bar area. James felt a wave of rage wash over him. In his 20 years in the restaurant industry, he had encountered racism in various forms, from subtle customer preferences to staffing biases. But this blatant mockery struck him on a deeply personal level. He looked around to see if anyone else was reacting. Most staff seemed to be deliberately ignoring the incident, keeping their eyes down and focusing on their tasks. Darren, visible through the kitchen pass-through, had a rigid expression that suggested he'd heard everything but was powerless to respond. The family was now seated, the parents helping their children with menus, completely unaware of the disgusting behavior that had just targeted them. Mike, catching sight of James's expression, approached him with a casual smile. Something wrong, Jay? The question felt like a test. Was the new guy going to make trouble or play along? James struggled to maintain his cover. I thought I heard something. Mike's smile didn't waver. Probably just the kitchen staff messing around. Don't worry about it. He clapped James on the shoulder. Let's focus on service, all right? Greg needs help with his tables. The dismissal was smooth, practiced, the response of someone accustomed to diffusing potential objections without acknowledging them. James nodded stiffly and returned to his duties, but inside he was seething. This wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. There was a culture of racism operating openly in his restaurant, sanctioned by management and inflicted on unsuspecting customers. He needed more evidence before he acted. For the next hour, James observed more closely. He noticed how the black family's food took longer to emerge from the kitchen than orders placed after theirs. He saw how Mike and Greg maintained a running commentary at the server station about various customers, with particular focus on non-white guests. And most disturbingly, he noticed how Sophia and Darren navigated this environment, trying to provide good service to all customers while avoiding conflict with their colleagues. Sophia would quietly expedite orders for tables that were being neglected. Darren would double-check plates destined for certain tables, ensuring they received the same quality as others. It was approaching 10 p.m. when James found a moment to speak with Sophia alone near the host stand during a brief lull. Has it always been like this? He asked quietly, dropping the pretense of casual conversation. Sophia looked startled, then wary. Like what? You know what I mean. The comments, the noises, the different service standards. She glanced around nervously before answering. It's gotten worse the past few months. Since Mike became evening manager. She hesitated. It wasn't always this bad. Why don't you report it? A bitter smile crossed her face. To who? Regional manager is Mike's drinking buddy. HR is in another state. And we all need these jobs. She straightened as a customer approached. I should get back to work. James nodded, understanding completely. The system that should protect employees like Sophia was broken, leaving them to choose between tolerating a toxic environment or risking their livelihoods. Shortly after, He managed a brief conversation with Darren when bringing an order correction to the kitchen. "Food looks great," James commented, keeping his tone casual. "You've been here long?" "3 years," Darren replied, focused on plating. "Been cooking since I was 16. You like it here?" James ventured. Darren's hands stilled momentarily. He glanced up, meeting James's eyes with a long, measuring look. "It pays the bills," he finally said, returning to his work. "Like anywhere, some days are better than others." The restraint in his answer spoke volumes. As the night wore on, James witnessed more incidents, smaller, but part of a clear pattern. A table of South Asian customers was seated near the kitchen despite numerous open tables in better locations. A black couple's request to speak to a manager about a minor issue with their meal was met with eye-rolling and a deliberately slow response from Mike. Then, just as the restaurant was beginning to thin out for the evening, a final incident pushed James past his breaking point. The black family with children was finishing their meal when their youngest, a girl about 7 years old, got up to use the restroom. As she walked past the server station, Greg leaned over to another server and whispered something that made them both laugh while looking at the child. Though James couldn't hear what was said, the malice behind the laughter was unmistakable. The little girl noticed, her steps faltering as she registered their attention. For a brief moment, her bright expression clouded with confusion and hurt before she continued to the restroom. It was the look on that child's face, the first moment of realizing that sometimes people will dislike you for no reason you can understand, that crystallized everything for James. He had seen that same look on his own daughter's face years ago, and had promised himself then that he would always stand against the forces that caused it. This wasn't just about business metrics or customer demographics anymore. This was about human dignity, and he had seen enough. James stepped away from the dining room, ostensibly to get supplies from the storage area. Instead, he went to the employee locker room, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Martin," he said when his COO answered, "I need you to implement Protocol 19. Immediately." Protocol 19 was their code for an emergency management intervention, something they had used only twice before in the company's history. "That's serious?" Martin asked, instantly alert. "Worse than we thought," James confirmed. "I'm about to shut this location down for the night and terminate most of the evening shift. I need HR on standby and security at the location within 15 minutes. "On it," Martin replied without hesitation. "Should I alert legal?" "Yes, and have the crisis management team ready. This might get media attention." After ending the call, James took a deep breath and returned to his locker. He removed his uniform shirt and changed back into his polo. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out the item that would end his charade, his executive ID badge with the Urban Plates logo and James Wilson, founder and CEO, clearly displayed. He clipped it to his shirt, straightened his shoulders, and walked back into the restaurant, prepared to face the reckoning he was about to unleash. James walked with purpose through the kitchen first, catching Darren's eye. The young chef did a double take, his spatula freezing mid-flip as he registered the ID badge. "Sir, are you?" "Yes," James confirmed quietly. "I need you to stay calm and continue what you're doing for the next few minutes. Can you do that for me?" Darren nodded, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like hope. "Good man," James said, patting him on the shoulder before continuing into the dining room. The restaurant had mostly cleared out for the evening, with only about 5 tables still occupied, including the black family with children. Mike was at the bar chatting with Greg and 2 other servers, all laughing at some shared joke. Sophia was clearing a recently vacated table, her back to the group. James approached the manager station and picked up the microphone used for announcements. He switched it on, the small feedback noise drawing everyone's attention. "Good evening," his authoritative voice carried throughout the restaurant. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is James Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of Urban Plates." The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped. Customers looked up from their meals. Staff members froze in place, confusion evident on their faces. Mike turned from the bar, his expression cycling rapidly from disbelief to understanding to fear. "First, I want to thank our customers for dining with us tonight," James continued, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "Unfortunately, I need to inform you that we are closing immediately due to an urgent operational issue. Your meals today are complimentary, and we'll be providing gift cards for a future visit at any Urban Plates location as a token of our appreciation for your understanding." Murmurs broke out among the remaining diners. James made eye contact with the Black family, who were watching him with curious expressions. "To our staff," James continued, his tone hardening slightly, "I've been working alongside you this evening as Jay, observing our operations firsthand. What I've witnessed tonight is completely unacceptable and violates every principle this company was founded upon." Mike took a step forward, his face pale. "Mr. Wilson, I can explain." James held up a hand, stopping a mid-sentence. "I heard the monkey noises when that family entered our restaurant." He pointed directly to the Black family, whose expressions shifted from curiosity to shock and then anger as they realized what had happened. "I saw how certain customers received second-class service based solely on the color of their skin. I witnessed the disrespect, the mockery, and the prejudice displayed by people wearing my company's uniform." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Several staff members looked at the floor, while others stood frozen in place. "Effective immediately," James continued, his voice filling the quiet space. "This location is closed until further notice. Mike Peterson, Greg Lawson, and any staff member who participated in or enabled discriminatory behavior tonight, you're terminated. Please collect your belongings and leave the premises. Security will arrive shortly to ensure an orderly departure." Greg's face flushed red. "You can't fire us without cause." James interrupted, his tone icy. "I have more than enough cause. Your behavior violated not only our explicit anti-discrimination policies, but basic human decency. If you'd like to challenge this termination, I invite you to do so through legal channels where I'll be happy to present evidence of your conduct." Mike stepped forward again, his demeanor shifting to placating. "Mr. Wilson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were just having a bit of fun, blowing off steam. It wasn't meant to be racist." James cut in, his voice sharp. "What exactly would you call making monkey noises when a Black family enters a restaurant? Please enlighten me as to the non-racist interpretation of that behavior." Mike fell silent, unable to formulate a response. James turned his attention to the remaining customers, who were watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to supportive nods. "Again, I sincerely apologize to everyone dining with us tonight, especially to those who were targeted by this behavior. This is not what Urban Plate stands for. Not now, not ever." He approached the Black family directly, speaking to them with sincere regret. "Sir, ma'am, I'm particularly sorry for what your family experienced here tonight. No one should ever be treated that way, especially not children." He glanced at their young daughter, who was watching him with solemn eyes. "Your meal is of course complimentary, and I would like to speak with you privately before you leave, if you're willing." The father nodded stiffly, his arm protectively around his daughter's shoulders. "We'd appreciate that." As James stepped away from their table, he noticed Sophia standing nearby, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't crying from fear of losing her job. He realized she was crying from relief. "Sophia," he called softly. "Darren, please stay after we close. I'd like to speak with you as well." They both nodded, understanding flashing in their eyes. Over the next 30 minutes, the restaurant emptied. The security team James had called arrived and escorted the terminated employees from the premises. Some left quietly, while others, Greg in particular, made threats about lawsuits and public backlash. James remained calm throughout, knowing he stood on solid ethical and legal ground. Once the terminated staff had left, James gathered the few remaining employees, Sophia, Darren, and 3 others who had not been directly involved in the discriminatory behavior, but had failed to speak up against it. "I need to be very clear," James told them, his expression grave. "What happened here tonight reflects a systemic failure, not just of individual behavior, but of leadership and culture. I take personal responsibility for that failure. I should have been more vigilant, more present, more aware of what was happening in my own restaurants." He paced slowly in front of them. This location will remain closed for the next 2 weeks. During that time, we'll be conducting a complete review of our operations, retraining staff, and implementing new accountability measures. Those of you standing here have a choice to make. James looked at each of them in turn. You can be part of rebuilding this location with a foundation of respect and inclusion, or you can choose to leave with severance. There is no middle ground, no silent bystander role moving forward. Everyone who works here must actively uphold our values. Sophia stepped forward, her voice quiet but determined. I want to stay. I wanted to speak up for so long, but she trailed off. But you were afraid. James finished for her. I understand. The system failed you as much as it failed our customers. Darren nodded in agreement. I'm in too, if you're serious about making real changes. I am, James assured them. Starting tonight, after speaking with the remaining staff and arranging for them to receive paid leave during the 2-week closure, James turned his attention to the Black family, who had waited patiently as he handled the immediate crisis. He approached their table, where they had remained seated despite the chaos around them. Thank you for your patience, James said, pulling up a chair. I'm truly sorry your family experienced this tonight. The father, who introduced himself as Michael Thompson, looked at James with a measured gaze. I appreciate you taking action. Most would have handled it privately, after we left. That would have been easier, James acknowledged. But it wouldn't have been right. What happened to your family deserved to be addressed openly and immediately. Michael nodded, then gestured to his wife and children. We didn't hear the noises you mentioned, but we felt something was off. The slow service, the cold treatment. My daughter noticed people looking at her, laughing. His voice tightened. She asked me if she'd done something wrong. The pain in the father's voice struck James deeply. She did nothing wrong, he said firmly, looking directly at the young girl. The people who were unkind are the ones who did something wrong, and that's why they had to leave. Mrs. Thompson spoke up. What happens now? Will you just hire new people who might do the same thing? It was a fair question. No, James replied. This incident has made it clear that we need fundamental changes. I'm implementing immediate reforms across all our locations. Enhanced diversity training, mystery shoppers from various backgrounds to test service equality, and a direct hotline for customers to report discriminatory experiences. He handed them his business card with his personal cell number written on the back. I'd also like to invite your family to be part of our community advisory board. We're forming one to ensure we're accountable to the communities we serve. The invitation seemed to surprise them. You want our input? Michael asked. I need it, James corrected. What happened tonight isn't just a PR problem to manage. It's a fundamental failure that requires direct input from people who've experienced its effects. After further conversation and making arrangements to follow up, the Thompson family left with James's sincere apologies and a promise of meaningful change. Once the restaurant was empty, James sat alone at the bar, the events of the evening weighing heavily on him. This was more than an isolated incident. It represented a system that had grown poisonous under his watch, despite his intentions and personal values. His phone buzzed with a text from Martin, PR team on standby. Local news got wind of something happening at the restaurant. How do you want to handle this? James considered his options. The easy path would be to minimize the incident, frame it as an isolated problem that had been swiftly addressed. Many companies would take that approach, treating it as a PR challenge rather than a moral failure. But that approach would miss the larger opportunity, the chance to acknowledge a painful truth and commit to genuine change. No spin, he texted back. Full transparency. I'll draft a statement tonight. The following morning, James held a press conference outside the closed Atlanta location. News cameras and reporters gathered as he stepped up to the microphone, flanked by Martin and the company's newly appointed chief diversity officer. Yesterday evening, James began, his voice clear and unwavering. I went undercover as a server in this Urban Plates location and witnessed behavior that was not only contrary to our company values, but deeply racist and harmful. I observed staff members making monkey noises when a black family entered our restaurant. I saw systematic differences in how customers were treated based on their race. Murmurs rippled through the gathered press. As CEO, I immediately shut down the restaurant and terminated the employees responsible. James continued. But I'm not here today to congratulate myself for doing the bare minimum of human decency. I'm here to acknowledge a painful truth. What happened in this restaurant didn't occur in a vacuum. It happened because systems I created allowed it to happen. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. I founded Urban Plates with the vision of creating spaces where everyone feels welcome and valued. Clearly, I have failed to ensure that vision was being lived out in every location. That failure is ultimately my responsibility. James outlined the concrete steps the company would be taking: the 2-week closure for retraining, the community advisory board, the enhanced reporting systems, and a third-party audit of all Urban Plates locations to identify potential issues. Some might see this incident as a crisis to manage, he concluded. I see it as a call to fulfill the promise our company made to every community we serve. We cannot undo the hurt experienced by customers in our restaurant, but we can honor them by ensuring it never happens again. The press conference generated significant attention, with reactions spanning from praise for the transparency to criticism that the response should have come sooner. But James remained steadfast in his approach, refusing to minimize the incident or deflect responsibility. Over the following 2 weeks, James personally oversaw the transformation of the Atlanta location. Sophia was promoted to front-of-house manager, with Darren elevated to executive chef. Together with a new general manager brought in from another location, they helped rebuild the team with a diverse group of employees committed to the company's renewed vision. Before reopening, James invited the Thompson family for a private tour of the renovated space. The physical changes were subtle. New artwork celebrating diverse cultural contributions to American cuisine, an open kitchen concept that increased visibility and accountability, tables arranged to eliminate preferred sections. But the most significant changes were in the people and processes. The new staff had undergone enhanced training. Mystery shoppers had been deployed to test service equality. And most importantly, everyone understood that inclusion wasn't just a corporate value statement. It was a non-negotiable expectation enforced from the top. What do you think? James asked Michael as they completed the tour. Michael looked around thoughtfully. It's a good start, but the real test will be 6 months from now, when the spotlight has moved on. Will the changes stick? A fair question, James acknowledged. That's why I'll be back, unannounced, to make sure they do. And why we need people like you on our advisory board, holding us accountable. On reopening day, the restaurant was packed, partly due to curiosity generated by the news coverage, but also because of the outpouring of community support for how the situation had been handled. James stayed through the lunch and dinner service, watching with satisfaction as the new team operated with warmth and professionalism toward every guest. As the evening wound down, he found Sophia overseeing the closing procedures with confident efficiency. "How does it feel?" he asked her. She smiled, the tension that had marked her expression during his undercover visit completely gone. "It feels right. Like this is how it always should have been. It's how it always will be, moving forward," James promised. "Not just here, but in every location." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, James sat alone in the quiet restaurant, reflecting on the journey of the past 2 weeks. The incident had been painful and challenging, but it had also created an opportunity for genuine transformation, not just of one restaurant, but of an entire company culture. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was a new review posted online. "Our family visited Urban Plates tonight after hearing about the changes they've made. The welcome was genuine, the service attentive, and the food excellent. Most importantly, we felt valued and respected as customers. Sometimes it takes courage to acknowledge problems and address them openly. This company seems to be doing that, and it shows in the experience they're now providing." The review was signed the Thompson family. James smiled, putting his phone away. There is still much work to do, systems to reform, and trust to rebuild. But tonight's success showed that meaningful change was possible when leaders were willing to face uncomfortable truths and take decisive action. As he stood to leave, James took one last look around the restaurant. The space felt different now, lighter somehow, as if cleared of an invisible weight. In the window, he caught his reflection, not the undercover Jay or the polished CEO, but simply a man trying to build something worthy of the communities he served. That, he realized, had been his mission all along. And while he had stumbled, the path forward was clearer than ever. 6 months later, James found himself back in Atlanta, this time genuinely incognito. With no disguise, but also no announcement, he slipped into the restaurant during a busy Friday night service, taking a small table in the corner to observe. The transformation was striking. The restaurant hummed with positive energy. The staff moved with purpose and genuine warmth, treating each table with equal attention and care. Most notably, the clientele had diversified significantly, returning to the inclusive mix that characterized successful Urban Plates locations. Sophia spotted him midway through his meal, a smile of recognition crossing her face. She approached his table with confidence. "Mr. Wilson, what a surprise. Just checking in," he replied with a smile. "No advance notice this time, either." "No need," she assured him. "We've got nothing to hide. In fact, we just received the highest customer satisfaction scores in the company last month." "I heard," James nodded. "Darren's new menu items are being rolled out to other locations, too. You should both be proud." Sophia's expression grew serious. "You know, that night when you revealed yourself and shut everything down, I never thought I'd say this, but it was one of the best things that could have happened here." "How so?" "It showed us that words matter. Actions matter. And that someone was paying attention." She gestured around the buzzing restaurant. "Now everybody pays attention, not out of fear, but because we all actually believe in what we're doing." As James finished his meal and prepared to leave, he noticed a familiar face, Michael Thompson, dining with his family at a large table near the window. Their eyes met across the room, and Michael gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Not quite approval, but something like respect. It was enough. The journey wasn't over, but this restaurant, once a place of shame and discrimination, had transformed into what it always should have been, a space where everyone truly belonged. As James stepped out into the Atlanta evening, he reflected on what the experience had taught him. Leadership wasn't just about vision statements and profit margins. It was about creating environments where human dignity was honored, where honest mistakes could be acknowledged and corrected, and where company values were lived rather than merely displayed on walls. The undercover boss had revealed an ugly truth. But from that painful revelation had come the opportunity to build something better, something authentic, inclusive, and ultimately more successful than what had existed before. And that, James decided as he walked to his car, was worth every difficult moment of the journey.